My name is Daniel Hayes, and 10 years ago, my parents threw my clothes into black trash bags and left them on the front lawn like I was garbage. I was 18 years old, standing barefoot in the rain with a torn backpack, a dead phone, and exactly $37 in my wallet. My mother wouldn't even look at me. She stood behind the screen door with her arms crossed while my father pointed toward the street and said the words that changed my life forever. If you walk away tonight, don't ever come back. The crazy part is, I didn't even do anything illegal. I didn't get arrested. I wasn't addicted to drugs. I wasn't violent. My crime was disappointing them. See, in my family, success only counted if it looked the way my father wanted. My older brother, Aaron, was the golden child, football captain, business major, the son Dad bragged about to everyone at church and every neighbor on our street. Aaron could breathe, and my parents would clap like he'd cured cancer. Me? I liked art, architecture, design. I spent nights sketching buildings in old notebooks while Dad called it playing with crayons. The day I told my parents I wanted to apply to an architecture program in Chicago, instead of joining Dad's construction company, the entire house went silent. Mom looked embarrassed. Dad looked insulted. "You think you're too good for this family now?" he asked. I tried explaining that it wasn't about being better. I just wanted my own life, my own future. But in my father's mind, loyalty meant obedience. If you didn't follow his plan, you were betraying him. Things got ugly fast after that. Dad stopped speaking to me unless it was to criticize something. Mom acted like I didn't exist. Aaron laughed every time we fought, like watching me fail was entertainment for him. Then came the final blow. 3 weeks after my high school graduation, I got accepted into one of the best architecture schools in the state. I remember holding that letter with shaking hands, thinking that maybe, finally, they'd be proud of me. Instead, Dad ripped the acceptance letter in half right in front of my face. "You're not wasting 4 years chasing some fantasy," he said coldly. "You work for me starting Monday." I told him no. That single word destroyed everything. By midnight, my bags were outside, my house key didn't work anymore, and while rain soaked through my hoodie, I realized something terrifying. My parents weren't trying to scare me, they genuinely wanted me gone, so I picked up those trash bags, walked into the dark, and promised myself one thing. One day, I'd come back for that house. The first night I slept in my car, it rained so hard I thought the windshield would crack. I remember pulling my knees to my chest in the back seat, staring at the fogged-up windows while my duffel bag soaked beside me. I was 18 years old, still wearing the restaurant uniform from my shift, and officially homeless because my father had decided I was dead weight. 3 hours earlier, he'd thrown my suitcase onto the lawn while my mother stood in the doorway pretending not to cry. "You want freedom so bad," Dad shouted. "Then figure out how the real world works." The neighbors watched from their porches while I shoved my clothes into garbage bags with shaking hands. My younger brother Ethan stood behind the curtains smiling like he'd just won something. Maybe he had. The truth was, my parents had been preparing for this moment for years. Ever since Ethan got accepted into private school, every dollar in the house started revolving around him. His football camps, his designer clothes, his first car at 16. Meanwhile, I worked double shifts at a diner just to buy community college textbooks. Dad called it building character. Funny how only I needed character. What finally pushed them over the edge was the scholarship letter. I'd gotten accepted into a university in Chicago with almost everything covered: tuition, housing, meal plan. For the first time in my life, I had a way out, a real future, but when I brought the letter home, Dad barely looked at it before tossing it onto the kitchen counter. "You think you're too good for this family now?" he asked. I still remember how quiet Mom was during dinner that night. She never defended me, never once. Silence was her specialty. 2 days later, I came home from work and found the locks changed. My suitcase was outside. Dad opened the door just enough to hand me a trash bag full of clothes. "You've got until sunrise to get your junk off my lawn," he said before slamming the door in my face. No goodbye, no hug, nothing. That night, parked behind a gas station with rain hammering against the roof, I made myself one promise. One day, I'd come back successful enough that they would regret every second of this. And 10 years later, standing in a crowded foreclosure auction with a bidding paddle in my hand, I realized that moment had finally arrived. I spent my first night alone in a bus station with $43 in my pocket and a trash bag full of clothes beside me. I remember watching families walk past me while pretending not to cry. Every few minutes, I checked my phone, hoping my parents would call and say this had all been a mistake. They never did. Around midnight, my father finally sent one message: "You wanted independence, now survive on your own." That was it. No concern, no apology, just a sentence that felt like a door slamming shut forever. I slept sitting upright under fluorescent lights while strangers stared at me like I was invisible. The next morning, I walked into school wearing the same clothes from the day before and lied to everyone about why my eyes were swollen. I told them I had allergies. The truth was harder to admit. I was homeless at 18 because my parents decided I was no longer useful to them. For the next few months, survival became my entire personality. I worked double shifts at a diner after classes, slept on a coworker's couch, and showered at the community gym before school. Every dollar mattered. Sometimes dinner was just crackers and vending machine coffee. But what hurt most wasn't the exhaustion. It was watching my parents continue their lives like I had never existed. My younger brother Daniel still lived comfortably at home. My parents posted smiling family photos online every weekend, while I counted coins to buy laundry detergent. Not once did they ask if I was okay. Then one night, everything got worse. I was halfway through my shift when my manager walked over holding the restaurant phone. "Somebody keeps calling for you," she whispered. "Sounds serious." I grabbed the receiver, confused. The moment I heard my mother's voice, my stomach tightened. She wasn't crying. She wasn't worried. She sounded angry. "You embarrassed us," she snapped immediately. "Your aunt saw you working in that disgusting diner." I almost laughed from shock. "I'm working because you threw me out. You made your choice," she replied coldly. "And stop telling people we abandoned you. It makes this family look bad." Family. That word nearly broke me. I stood there gripping the phone while customers laughed behind me and plates crashed in the kitchen. My mother lowered her voice before saying something I would never forget. "If you had just obeyed us, none of this would have happened." Then she hung up. I stared at the deadline for several seconds before slowly placing the receiver down. Something changed inside me that night. The sadness was still there, the pain too. But underneath it, something colder had started growing: determination. And 10 years later, standing in front of their foreclosed house while an auctioneer handed me the final paperwork, I remembered that exact phone call, every single word. The auction hall smelled like dust, old paper, and cheap coffee. I sat in the third row, wearing a black coat I could finally afford without checking my bank balance first. 10 years ago, I had stood outside my parents' front door with a trash bag full of clothes while rain soaked through my sneakers. Now I was sitting in a room filled with investors waiting to buy the very house they threw me out of. My fingers rested calmly on bidder number 18, but inside, my heart was beating so hard it almost hurt. The realtor at the front cleared his throat. "Next property, foreclosure auction, 4-bedroom suburban home on Hawthorne Lane." My childhood address flashed across the screen. A blurry photo of the blue shutters appeared behind him, and suddenly I was 18 again, standing on that porch while my mother screamed that I was poisoning the family with my failures. "You're lazy. You're embarrassing. You'll never survive without us." I remembered every word. The bidding started at $180,000. A man near the aisle immediately raised his card. 180. Another voice answered, 190. I stayed silent. I wasn't there emotionally anymore. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But then another image appeared on the projector. The kitchen. The same kitchen where my father had ripped my college acceptance letter in half because I refused to give him my savings account access. The same kitchen where my mother stood silently while he called me selfish for wanting a life outside their control. I swallowed hard. 210. Someone called? 215. The realtor scanned the room. Do I hear 220? I slowly lifted my number. 220 from bidder 18. A few heads turned toward me before the bidding continued. 230. 240? My chest tightened as memories crashed into me one after another. Sleeping in my car behind a grocery store, showering at a gas station before community college classes, working double shifts while pretending everything was okay. And through all of it, not one call from my parents. Not one. The price climbed higher. 260. 270? The investor beside me finally leaned closer. Honestly, this house isn't worth much more than that. I looked straight ahead. It is to me. The room quieted slightly. 280? The realtor asked. I raised my card again. Bidder 18 at 280,000. The older couple across the room hesitated. After a few seconds, they shook their heads. The realtor lifted his hammer. Going once. My breathing slowed. Going twice. And then the back doors opened. My mother walked inside first. Her face was pale. My father followed behind her, looking exhausted, older than I remembered. The moment his eyes landed on me, he froze completely. The room fell silent. My mother's lips parted slowly in disbelief. "No," she whispered. The realtor looked confused. "Sir, ma'am, please take a seat." But my father kept staring directly at me like he'd seen a ghost. And then he realized exactly why I was there. Too late. The auction room smelled like old carpet, burnt coffee, and quiet desperation. I sat in the third row with my bidding card resting calmly in my lap while people whispered around me about foreclosure prices and market value. None of them knew why I was really there. None of them knew the house being auctioned had once been my home. The same house where my father threw my duffel bag onto the lawn the night I turned 18 and told me I was dead weight. The same porch where my mother stood silently behind the screen door and watched me leave without stopping him. 10 years later, I was back. Only this time, I wasn't the girl begging to stay. I was the woman deciding whether they could. The auctioneer adjusted his microphone and began listing the property details. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, colonial style, defaulted mortgage after 14 months of missed payments. Every word hit me harder than I expected. I remembered repainting those bedroom walls at 16 because my parents couldn't afford contractors back then. I remembered studying under dim kitchen lights while working night shifts at a grocery store just to save enough money for community college after they refused to help me. Funny how people forget who carried them when times were hard. Then I saw them. My parents walked into the back of the room looking older than I remembered. Dad's shoulders were slumped now. Mom looked thinner, nervous, clutching her purse with both hands. They hadn't noticed me yet. They were too busy arguing quietly with a man in a gray suit, probably their lawyer. My chest tightened unexpectedly. For a split second, memories rushed back so fast it hurt. Christmas mornings, pancakes on Saturdays, my mother braiding my hair before school. Not every memory was cruel. That was the dangerous part. Then my father finally looked up. Our eyes locked across the room. The color drained from his face instantly. My mother turned, following his stare, and her hand flew to her mouth. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I simply lifted my bidding card slightly and placed it back down on my knee. That's when they understood, and the silence between us became unbearable. Realization. The auction room smelled like dust, burnt coffee, and old paper. People sat quietly in metal chairs, flipping through property sheets like they were shopping for groceries instead of someone's ruined life. I stood near the back in a black coat, my hands calm in my pockets while the auctioneer prepared the next file. No one there recognized me, and why would they? 10 years ago, I was just the unwanted daughter thrown out with a garbage bag full of clothes on my 18th birthday. But today, I wasn't here as the girl they abandoned. I was here as the buyer. My parents sat 3 rows ahead of me, older now, smaller somehow. My father's shoulders had collapsed inward over the years, and my mother kept nervously twisting tissues between her fingers. They looked exhausted, desperate. The bank had finally foreclosed on the house after years of unpaid debts, failed refinancing attempts, and legal notices they thought would somehow disappear if ignored long enough. I stared at the back of their heads and remembered everything. The freezing rain the night Dad shoved me onto the porch. The suitcase that split open across the driveway while my clothes soaked in dirty water. Mom standing behind the screen door refusing to look at me while Dad shouted, "You're selfish, lazy, and ungrateful. If you think adulthood is so easy, go survive without us." I had survived, barely at first. I slept in my car for 3 weeks, worked double shifts at a diner during the day, and cleaned office buildings at night. I studied business courses online using free library Wi-Fi because college was never an option after they cut me off. Every step forward felt like dragging broken glass through my chest. But eventually, things changed, slowly, painfully, then all at once. At 26, I launched my own property investment company with 2 employees and a borrowed desk inside a warehouse office. 4 years later, I owned apartment complexes in 3 states, and now I was here. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Property 16, 4-bedroom residential home located on Willow Creek Drive. My childhood address. A heavy silence filled the room. Opening bid, $180,000. A man near the front raised his card. $185. Another bidder answered immediately, $190. My father lowered his head into his hands. My mother whispered something through tears. Then I slowly raised my card. $300,000. The room went completely silent. Every head turned toward me, and for the first time in 10 years, my parents finally saw me. Silence.